experience where two have truly become one. God is at the center of us, our purpose and vision in His love. We dedicate our today, tomorrow, and always to You, our King. Bless and let there be love in our home. The marriage experience ordained by You alone. The marriage experience. The marriage experience ordained by You alone.
Welcome to the Marriage Experience program with Ayakunle and Boside Santos, where they explore what it means to cultivate a God-centric marriage by delivering realistic and biblical wisdom, pointers, and insights from couples and individuals on the marriage journey. Join them today as they share some insights. Enjoy.
Welcome, lovely family and friends, to this week's episode of the Marriage Experience program. We're always excited and honored you stop by for these weekly conversations. Pull up your chair, settle in with your favorite drink and maybe snacks, and let's get into today's conversation. Our conversations every week are spirit-led, where we address issues relating to marriage from a biblical point of view. And we also share practical tools to help you build strong, thriving Christian marriages. It's truly a delight to walk this journey with you, growing together and building marriages that reflect God's heart.
Indeed, welcome to today's episode of the Marriage Experience program. As always, it's a pleasure to have you with us. If this is your first time joining our virtual table, a most delightful welcome to you. And if you're returning, we are glad to have you back. As we love to remind you here on the Marriage Experience, there's always something for everyone, no matter where you are on the marriage journey.
So we've got something fun at Heart Song Live Radio, which started this month. That's before we go into today's program. Let's just share that with you. We're teaming up with the Scottish Bible Society to run a little weekly Bible quiz on the shows. Nothing complicated, just light, engaging, and a lovely way to keep you all interacting with the word. This is how it'll work. Towards the end, or maybe round about the end, we'll share with you one Bible question every week. You'll then respond with your answers by text or email. Details we'll share with you at the end of the program when we share the Bible question for this week. And the prize each week will be a beautiful copy of Love, Death and Resurrection. That's gifted by the Scottish Bible Society.
Yeah, so looking forward to you taking part.
Absolutely.
It's just going to be fun.
Yeah.
Right, now that we've settled in and ready, let's dive into today's conversation. Last week, we opened up the conversation about legacy.
That's been on our hearts lately.
True. Legacy, that it's more than just money or assets that you leave behind. Now, we talked about legacy as faith, as character, and daily surrender. But today, we want to lean into a dimension which often comes up when people think about legacy, and that's money. Now, because while we affirm that legacy isn't only financial, it would be incomplete to ignore that wealth, when stewarded well, of course, can become a powerful tool for love, for service, and lasting impact as well. So today's episode is about how couples can walk a legacy journey with finances in a way that honors God and blesses humanity.
So the truth of the matter is, to establish upfront at the heart of a biblical legacy, we need to know that God owns it all. God owns it all. Psalm 24 verse 1 declares that the earth is the Lord's and everything in it.
Including your finances.
Including your finances, every one of us. And all who live in it. There's another scripture that talks about gold and silver belonging to the Lord and the cattle upon 1,000 hills. That means all earnings, every home, every account balance, every opportunity, all originate from God. Jesus strengthened this perspective throughout his teaching. He spoke about money more than he did about prayer on or heaven.
That's
That
interesting.
was
Yeah.
something that I found interesting a while back when I discovered this truth that Jesus, he didn't talk about it, not because money itself is evil, but because money has the power to reveal our true allegiance. Matthew 6:21, for instance, says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And this reframes wealth from possession to entrustment to empowerment. Now, couples are not owners, but stewards, managers of God's resources for God's purposes. You and I, your husband and your wife and your husband, both of us here, we are not the owners of whatever comes to us, but we are stewards. And the question then shifts from how much can we keep to how can we faithfully manage what belongs to God.
That's a very interesting shift, because legacy tends to be how much can we keep
amass?
and leave behind for our parents.
Yeah.
But it's really all about management. When couples embrace stewardship rather than ownership, financial conversations begin to change. It's no longer my money versus your money, but it's our stewardship under God. Our stewardship under God. Now, if God is the source, then you can rest in Him and know that His provision is the main focus instead of striving endlessly for control. Financial planning becomes less about one spouse convincing the other and more about aligning together under God's vision. So it's about looking at where the focal point is, and the focal point here is God.
And it often it would tend to pull the two of you together rather than either on different camps,
Yes.
trying to pitch to the other what is good or what is not good. If the focus is God and how to manage His resources, then it's a different ballgame altogether.
Yeah, and so research even shows that couples who share a sense of higher purpose in finances experience less stress and greater marital satisfaction. Now, why is this? Because stewardship lifts the conversation above personal wants into a shared calling. It again, the focus is taken off oneself. Think of it like a vineyard manager in biblical times. Now, the landowner entrusted the vineyard to caretakers to cultivate, to protect, and to yield fruit. We see that in Matthew 21:33 to 41. Now, the vineyard didn't belong to them, but they were responsible for its flourishing. That's the posture Scripture calls couples to adopt towards wealth. It's not hoarding for yourself, but cultivating for God's glory and the blessing of others.
And even the Jewish tradition has some profound practices which enriches this idea of stewardship. Now, let's look at a few of them. There's the tzedakah, which is righteous giving. It unlike charity, what you give to charity, which implies optional generosity. Tzedakah is seen as a moral obligation. So, in other words, it's a must that you do this. Wealth is a trust from God, and it's meant to sustain the community. The Bible talks about there always being the poor in the community, and we're responsible for them. Now, when you adopt this mindset, seeing giving not as extra, but as central to financial faithfulness, then it takes you, into this mindset of seeing wealth creation or legacy building as stewardship or managing God's wealth. And then there's the tikkun olam, which is repairing the world. Remember Genesis, where God asks us to replenish the earth. So in rabbinic thought, one's resources are part of God's plan to bring healing and justice to the world. And every coin spent or saved can participate in God's restoration. And then there's the Sabbath economics. Remember the scriptures that talk about leaving the land to rest after a period. So by keeping Sabbath, and of course also that the commandment to keep Sabbath. When we keep Sabbath, when they keep Sabbath, Jewish families, they historically modeled that their worth was not measured by endless productivity, and that the rest itself was stewardship, and which was declaring their trust in God as their provider.
Yeah, this just reminds us of about the fact that Sabbath, yeah, many people take Sabbath as being Sunday or Saturday, but Sabbath really, what it means is it's just taking
Resting
a
in
period of
God.
rest.
Resting in God.
You know, taking time out in today's language.
Yeah. So it's, I mean, when we look at all of these practices together, we'll see they will remind us that wealth is never an end in itself. Rather, it's a tool for righteousness, for healing, and for witnessing. Imagine a couple holding their monthly budget meeting not as a stress chore, but as an act of worship. And instead of asking, how much can we afford? They ask, how can this reflect God's kingdom? In that moment, budgeting moves from math to ministry.
That's interesting. Math to ministry. So, what financial stewardship and legacy framework could we then adopt or adapt, for these practices? That would be budget as worship. Budget as worship. Proverbs 3:9 says, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of your crops. So maybe treat your budget meeting like a prayer meeting. Start with thanksgiving, then review income and expenses with the mindset of stewardship. You want to ask questions like, what here honors God? What here distracts us? When you approach budgeting spiritually, you'd likely fight less, because the attitude is joint accountability to God, not competition with each other, or competition trying to see how much you can get out of it. Practicing tzedakah, which is righteous giving. Proverbs 19:17 says, whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done. Likely, we already saw to the Jewish person, giving is not an extra generosity, but it's an obligation which reflects God's justice. Decide as a couple on a baseline percentage of income to give, regardless of fluctuations, making giving non-negotiable when possible. Attached to it, it causes that, it causes you to reflect your shared values. Shared generosity strengthens bonds. You then feel a stronger sense of purpose. Why? Because you have a common goal, which is outside both of you, and then it also gives you a stronger sense of partnership when you give together.
Yeah, we also saw the Jewish Sabbath economics where they resisted endless productivity. Remember, like I said earlier on, the commandment in Exodus 20, the commandment is 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. Now, to the Jews, Sabbath is financial as much as it is spiritual. It's a declaration we trust God, not the grind for our provision. So add Sabbath rhythms in your finances. This could mean pausing consumer spending one day a week or once a month, doing a gratitude audit instead of chasing more. The reality is couples who rest financially instead of constantly striving, they experience reduced anxiety and greater contentment. And another one is setting a family mission statement for money. We talked about writing a family mission statement last week. And we all know the scripture in Habakkuk 2, where God invites us to write the vision and make it plain. And a simple financial mission statement could be our finances exist to glorify God, secure our family's needs, and bless our community. We know the scripture out of 2 Corinthians 5, I believe it is. 5:19, I believe it is. Now, a shared vision reduces conflict, like Ayokunle just mentioned. Money fights often spring from unspoken assumptions, but a written mission keeps you aligned and focused on legacy, not just lifestyle. Now, when you embrace stewardship together, money no longer defines or divides you. Instead, it becomes part of your witness, a living testimony that God provides, God directs, and God multiplies what is surrendered to Him.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience program with Ayakunle and Bosade Santos.
So we'll look at a real life example of a couple who have followed these principles in their own lives and seen God turn things around for them. We share the story of Josh and Priscilla from the Marriage After God podcast. They shared how tension gripped their marriage when they were buried in debt. But as they aligned their hearts with Scripture and began paying off small bills one by one, they experienced profound relief and renewed unity. Priscilla shared about their first garage sale, which brought in about £500. That helped them to build an emergency fund. She said this small victory was what lifted their spirits and rekindled their faithfulness. So what we're looking here is that what that did was that it then began to give them some sense of purpose. And then they started having the ability to give again, starting with something equivalent to about $25 a week then, and then to $50, and eventually to a full tithe. There is a powerful illustration of how small, faithful steps can transform both finances and marriage. Last week, our pastor shared how sitting with his wife to design their financial strategy together had tripled not just their savings, but the ability to invest in the opportunities God is bringing to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Practicing budgeting as worship. We mentioned, we see how Josh and Priscilla's small steps of debt repayment led them into giving, even when money wasn't, that abounding, but they chose to honor God. So legacy through intentional planning. We talked about our pastor's intentional planning with his wife, which led them to building a purposeful financial legacy. Proverbs 13:22 reminds us that a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. Notice the intentional stretch, not just for one generation, but two. Biblical wealth is generational. It's meant to ripple forward, providing continuity, stability, and flourishing beyond our own lifetime. Wealth in God's economy is a tool, a resource entrusted to us for the sake of building up families, communities, and ultimately His kingdom. But here's the caution. Wealth can so easily slip from tool to idol.
That's very true.
Yeah. Jesus told us in Luke chapter 12 that to watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. So when wealth becomes the measure of identity, it no longer serves us, it enslaves us. The house, the car, the bank balance, the promotion, all of these things are not wrong in themselves. But when they become the substance of our worth, we're treading on dangerous ground.
In consumer-driven cultures, such as most Western cultures, couples often mistake lifestyle upgrades for legacy. The newest car, the bigger house, the vacations posted online. These become the markers of success. Yet, children don't inherit the fleeting satisfaction of those upgrades. What truly shapes them, what stays with them along, for them for the rest of their lives. After, of course, the possessions have faded, after the cars have gone, are now old, is the wisdom, the stewardship habits, and the spiritual stability modeled by their parents. Think of it this way. It's not the car you leave behind that matters the most, but the way you taught your children to handle the keys of responsibility. So it's not the car, it's how to handle the keys. It's not the money in their accounts, but the framework you gave them for generosity, for contentment, and for the strength of character in seasons of lack. Wealth, when stewarded biblically, serves worship instead of replacing it. It serves worship rather than replacing it. It becomes a testimony to your children of faith and discipline, a testimony to your to a community of generosity and integrity, and testimony even to the world of a God who provides and a God who sustains. In other words, wealth is not the legacy. The way you handle wealth is the legacy.
That is the bottom line of it. The way you handle wealth is the legacy. This past week I came across a young man's post on LinkedIn, and how he talked about how he, instead of, his son is now 7 and coming up to that age where it's, oh, I want this, I want that, how he and his wife began to intentionally teach him how to understand money, and how they actually showed him their own budget book, which, they call it their blue book, which they write in every month, all their budget. And he began to show his son, they began to show their son how, what is what. And if he requested for something that wasn't in the book, then the boy automatically understood that this wasn't budgeted for. And I think the boy has a YouTube channel now, and for every video that is watched, or whatever happens on that YouTube channel, the dad would give him some amount of money, which he started to save. And that way they're beginning to teach him how to build even legacy right from that age 7. So this is what we are pointing to, that it's never too early to start helping our children to understand the characteristics of money and the principles of legacy building. In financial discipleship circles, Howard and Beverly Dayton are names that many Christians will know. Howard once lived chasing wealth as the ultimate marker of success. To him, it was the bigger deals, the bigger house, the bigger everything. But in the 1970s, he was introduced to Christ and to what scripture really says about money. And that encounter completely reshaped his vision. He and Beverly began to see wealth not as theirs to build status, but as God's tool to build the kingdom. They scaled back on unnecessary lifestyle upgrades and instead created rhythms of giving, saving, and wise spending that reflected their faith. Howard went on to found Compass Finances God's Way. That's a ministry that helped countless couples and families around the world learn biblical financial stewardship. I'm sure you may have heard about that. So the key here is that their children and grandchildren didn't just inherit financial provision, they inherited a framework of faithfulness with money, which, like I was sharing with that man I saw on LinkedIn. They saw their parents prioritize generosity over luxury, stewardship over status, mission over accumulation.
Now, that's legacy. That is legacy. Not just leaving wealth, but it's leaving wisdom behind, the kind that ripples down generations and across nations. And for every couple, this doesn't mean you have to start a ministry. It could look like refusing to overstretch for a house you can't afford, choosing to tithe and give even when it feels tight, teaching your children to save, give, and to share, or even setting up simple practices like a family generosity fund.
Yeah, that was part of the thing that couple said. They also taught their son how to give.
So when you model these practices, you're saying our wealth is a tool. It serves God, it serves people, it doesn't define us. So building a financial legacy together isn't just about the techniques, it's about aligning hearts, about aligning habits, and aligning scripture as well, really. So let's walk through some practical rhythms couples can adopt. In Amos 3:3, it asks, can two walk together unless they agree? Now, if spouses are not aligned financially, tension then simmers beneath the surface. Maybe one partner saves diligently while the other spends freely. Maybe one dreams of retiring early while the other wants to start a business. Without a shared vision, money becomes a wedge. A legacy mindset begins with honest conversations. You ask questions like, what do we believe God is calling us to build? Or how do we want to bless our children or our church or our community? When couples unite around purpose, their financial decisions gain direction and peace.
Now, budgets often feel cold and restrictive. We were talking with a couple, during the week, and one of the things that we came up with was that one of them knew how to budget so well and would live by it, whilst the other was still getting into it. But when you think of a budget as liturgy, that's a practice that reveals what you worship, then it changes how you view budgeting. Budgeting would no longer be the restrictive, rigid, controlling tool, but it will become an act of worship. It will become your way to worship. Now, Jesus said, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." That's in Matthew 6, verse 21. And each budget line, groceries, giving, holidays, savings, now become a reflection of your values rather than, oh, this is the limit. I cannot go past this place. That instead of asking, what can we afford? You would ask, does this spending align with what we say we love most? When a budget becomes worship, it moves from control to freedom. 2 Corinthians 9:7 calls us to give, not reluctantly or under pressure, but cheerfully. This means generosity isn't what's left over at the end of the month. It's baked into the rhythm of financial life. For some couples, it could just mean tithing faithfully. And for others, it might mean setting aside a generosity fund to respond when needs arise. Now, the psychological and sociological beauty of all of this is that generosity shifts the emotional climate of a marriage. Instead of money always being about us versus bills, it becomes us participating in God's provision for others.
Proverbs 22:7 is blunt, and it says, "The borrower is servant to the lender." That's very simple and straightforward. Debt doesn't just affect numbers on a spreadsheet, it affects power dynamics in a marriage. Anxiety, secrecy, and even shame then begin to creep in when debt looms. Couples who name debt honestly, set a repayment strategy, and resist lifestyle creep often find emotional freedom alongside financial freedom. Legacy shaped by debt is actually very fragile. Legacy shaped by stewardship is sustainable. So there's a big difference there. Genesis 41 gives us Joseph's wisdom, and it looks at how he stored in years of plenty to withstand years of famine. And remember, he got the wisdom from God. Savings is not about hoarding in fear, but preparing with faith. Preparing with faith. And
That
when you
makes
think
all the
about it,
difference.
saving is not trying to prepare for the rainy day. If you think about that, it's empowering yourself for what tomorrow requires. Couples
Wow.
can frame savings as stewardship, not as a lack of trust in God, but a readiness to serve when the needs arise. And that, honestly, that really is it. Investment too can be a way of multiplying what God entrusts, as in the parable of the talents, remember in Matthew 25. But integrity is key. No shortcuts, no get-rich-quick schemes, no compromising values, nothing like that. Perhaps the most overlooked practice is financial honesty. Secrecy around money erodes marriages faster than almost any other issue. Studies consistently show that financial infidelity, that's hiding purchases, accounts, or debt, undermines trust very, very deeply. But when couples open the books, that trust grows, compounds, and it makes things grow faster than interest itself. Transparency says we are in this together fully, and in this together doesn't mean in this bad or in this good only. We're in this total together. Together, these practices shape wealth into a tool of worship, not a wedge of conflict. Into a tool of worship, not a wedge of conflict. They turn financial management into spiritual formation, a daily exercise in trust, in honesty, and in love.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience program with Ayakunle and Bosade Santos.
Now, when Jesus described what matters in the end, he didn't speak of bank balances or estates. In Matthew 25:35 to 40, he spoke of feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, welcoming the stranger, and visiting the prisoner. Eternal legacy is measured by love. It's expressed in tangible acts of service. And when you as a couple, when you're building a financial legacy, what this means is that wealth is not an end in itself. It's a tool. We can't overemphasize that. It's a tool. I'm still trying to get my head around, or well, maybe not get my head, but get over, not even get over, but like drink
Get a
in,
grip, yeah.
drink in, what you said earlier on, that savings is empowering yourself for what's to come in the future. So when you think about it that way, it puts a different spin on it, because then there is hope, there is expectation for how you are able to serve, in the future. Now, the house, the investments, the business profits, all of these can be positioned to multiply goodness in the lives of others. Now, supporting local or global missions. These are things you can do. Setting up scholarships for underprivileged students and partnering with microfinance programs that empower families to start businesses. These are legacy programs that you can engage in. Building or funding community centers, hospitals, or churches. Don't think you can't. You can, especially when you make yourself a steward, when you make yourself a ready steward of God's resources. Even something as simple as quietly helping a family in your church to cover rent or medical bills. Every act of generosity becomes a ripple, and wealth multiplies most beautifully when it multiplies others. Remember Abraham. God told Abraham, you are blessed to be a blessing.
I really like that. Wealth multiplies most beautifully when it multiplies others. And really, that is the bottom line. The Green family, the owners of Hobby Lobby in the States, US, embody this principle. Rather than treating wealth as personal reward, they've directed significant resources towards Bible translation, Christian education, and museums that preserve faith history. That is amazing. That is really amazing. Their decisions show how stewardship can ripple far beyond their household, impacting millions globally. Couples who align their financial legacy with service often find it then reshapes the tone of their marriages too. Money stops being just about security or lifestyle. It becomes a tool for impact. And that word has come up again, a tool for impact. That then shift things from what we may have been seeing money as, to what it really does, or what it really should do in relieving pressure. It lives visions and cultivates unity. In other words, when couples ask not what can we keep, but who can we bless, then wealth then begins to gain eternal weight.
Absolutely. Again, Proverbs 21:20 reminds us, precious treasure and oil are in the wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it. Legacy isn't just built by what you earn, it's preserved by what you don't consume. Couples who desire to live a godly legacy must embrace the discipline of restraint. We have a saying in my language, Yoruba, that you don't eat with all 10 fingers. That means everything you have, you don't just consume. Yeah, but saying no to unnecessary spending today creates space for children and grandchildren to say yes tomorrow.
And if you think about it, what we talked about savings, you say no today is empowering you to say
Somebody
yes
else tomorrow. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It's not about living joyless, austere lives. It's not about, it's not about living so frugally to the point that you are not even enjoying life at all. But it's about living with vision. Delayed gratification. I mean, a lot of people talk about that these days. It doesn't mean that you're depriving yourselves. It means you're investing in something greater than the moment, right? A holiday skipped might become seed money for your children's education. A smaller house today might free up resources for ministry impact tomorrow.
So here's where marriage dynamics gets real. Not every couple shares the same tolerance for waiting. One spouse may lean towards saving while the other feels life is too short not to enjoy now. And both are valid. You cannot save until you're 100 years old and you ask the question, so when am I going to enjoy myself? Life is for the living, as people say, yes, true. But at the same time, we always want to prepare for the future. It doesn't matter how old you are, there's still a future of some sort. So when this is left unaddressed, these differences can spark cycles of frustration. One says you're too stingy and the other says you're too careless. The discipline of delay then is not only about money, it's about love and compromise. It requires couples to talk openly about why savings matters, about, how to build small rewards into the journey so no one feels starved of joy. How to set shared goals. Both partners see what the sacrifice is building towards. So there's a clear vision, So when couples align around this discipline, financial restraint stops feeling like punishment. It becomes a shared act of love for each other, for the future generations, and most especially for God's purposes. In short, legacy is less about the dramatic windfalls and more about the quiet, disciplined choices made day after day.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, legacy isn't simply about numbers, properties, or investments. It's about surrender. Remember, Psalm 127 tells us that unless the Lord builds the house, the builder labor in vain. So every financial decision that you would make as a couple is not just economic, it's spiritual. The question is never only can we afford this, but does this reflect God's kingdom values? You're asking, are we using wealth to lift burdens or to build barriers? Are we holding money with open hands or clenched fists? Are we shaping a story that points back to ourselves or one that points upward to God? When you see wealth through the lens of worship, legacy takes on its truest form. It stops being just about what you leave in the bank and it becomes what you deposit into hearts, into your community, and ultimately into eternity. Remember, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. But when the numbers fade, the assets pass on, and the lifestyle trends shift, what remains is the witness of a couple who manage God's resources faithfully and whose love of Him spilled over into love of others. That's the kind of legacy that no moth or rust can ever destroy.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode, which has been yet another stimulating conversation. I have learned quite a lot myself. And as you say, keep showing up for each other. Keep inviting God into the process. And remember, you are not alone in this marriage experience. So we see a huge thank you again for joining us tonight at the Marriage Experience family table here on Heartsong Live Radio, Scotland's first Christian radio station on DAB Digital.
So we're here every Monday with a replay on Wednesday. If you're listening on Monday, stay tuned for Arise with the Loho at 11 p.m. and on Wednesdays. Don't miss what's on your plate with Annette. It's an inspiring lifestyle show spotlighting amazing people in their communities.
And we'd love to, your continued support for Heartsong Live Radio so we can keep bringing you uplifting programs like this, amplifying hope and celebrating faith, creativity, and community around the world. To donate, just visit heartsonglive.co.uk/donate. Remember, every gift, big or small, makes a difference.
So we'd love to hear from you. You can share your feedback with us anytime at MXperience@lidiosantos.com. All our episodes are also available on our YouTube channel. That the handle is at Marriage Experience, as we always say. That's experience without the E. And don't forget to download the HSL app that's the Heart Song Live app, for quick, convenient access to all our live programs and the latest weekly schedules. It's also the perfect place to catch up on anything you might have missed.
And so now to the quiz, which we talked about at the very start of the episode. The question for this week is this: who fell asleep during Paul's long sermon and fell out of a window? Each time I remember the scripture, it just amuses me. Paul was going on for so long and man fell asleep. So who fell asleep and fell out of the window? So if you'd like to take part in today's quiz, just text your answer to 07305 070 411 07305 070-411, or you can email info@heartsonglive.co.uk. So just send your answers to the question,
and of course with your name.
With your name, of course, and if you're one of the winners, you'll be contacted. Text the charge at your standard network rate, and there are no additional charges from us. Please make sure you have the bill payer's permission before entering. Wishing you the very best.
Again, thank you for spending this time with us at our virtual table. We can't wait to sit with you again next week. Until then, goodbye. Have a wonderful, wonderful week ahead, and may God richly bless you.
Join Ayakule and Bosade again next week on the Marriage Experience program as they bring God's truth to help you build your marriage God's way. Till then, remember, marriage is God's idea, and it is a good thing.